First of all, it sounds like everyone can hear me okay? Yeah, see the nods, okay. My thanks to you for taking the time to stop by. As the program and obviously the slide mentions, the subject of the talk is about the need for speed and how we can use prescriptive and predictive analytics in a way that is fast and responsive. I'm going to talk a little bit about, as coming into it, first of all, I'm going to give everyone a little bit of an overview of Manheim and Manheim auctions. You probably have not heard much about it. It is the world's largest wholesale vehicle auction exchange. It is a business-to-business enterprise, so the consumer retail channel typically has not heard much about it, but it is very much a major player in the automotive industry. After that overview, I'm going to transition into the main point of the presentation, which is about the responsive prescriptive analytics. And this is the part that I hope that you can take away from the talk, that you can find some information that's useful in your own particular area of work. And then I will come back into some case studies that I have from Manheim that I think will illustrate some methodologies and insights that I present in the middle section. Okay, a little bit about Manheim. We are the world's leading wholesale auto auction by size and sales volume in the world. We have 118 locations worldwide. 69 of them are here in North America, continental U.S., Puerto Rico, Hawaii, and Canada. We have $3 billion in revenue, about 22,000 employees. And in the previous calendar year that just concluded, we handled over 8 million used vehicles worth about $50 billion in value. Most of these vehicles are sourced from two primary areas: commercial consignors, so vehicles that are coming off of fleet, rentals, leases, in some small cases repossessions. We have the lion's share of that market, and those vehicles end up in our auctions and are purchased primarily almost 100% by the dealers. You do have to have a dealer license, and it's not open to the retail market, it's not open to any of the consumers. We have, and like it says, we handle about $50 billion in value in vehicles every year. The service is not just auction. It's, in addition to the lane sales, we do specialty and heavy truck. Salvage. Our salvage arm is Total Resource Auctions. We also, and part of the group that I'm with is Manheim Consulting, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a few minutes. We also offer financial services. Sometimes you'll hear the term flooring. That is essentially the finance piece that we offer dealers on short-term financing so that they can purchase the vehicle on loan, money loan from us, and we'll repay it typically when they sell it or auction it off again. We also have do all the things associated with the transactions of vehicles, title processing, certified pre- and post-sale inspections, and we also have an export arm. There's a substantial market for vehicles in the used market for export outside of North America. We are a subsidiary of Cox Enterprises. We're based in Atlanta, Georgia. Cox Enterprises is the media group that includes Cox Cable, Cox Communications, the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, and Dayton Daily News as part of our portfolio. And in recent years, we've grown in the automotive space. Autotrader.com, Kelley Blue Book, and vAuto, which is a dealer inventory management system, are all part of the Cox Enterprises umbrella. Now, in a second here, I'm going to go ahead and show you a video. You can see, before I show it, you can see this is one of our larger auctions. Some of our auctions, our largest auction is our namesake auction in Manheim, Pennsylvania, near Lancaster, probably about half hour from Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. That auction does, on average, about 5,000 vehicles a week. And they have multiple sales, and it's a fascinating thing to watch because what you see up there is the auction barns, and you'll have something like 30 lanes, and all the vehicles will line up. And each lane is usually dedicated for a particular sale. It can be dedicated to a particular manufacturer. It could be a particular rental company, a leasing company, or dealers. We certainly take dealers. Dealers constitute now about 55% of our inventory that we source. And it's a lot of fun to walk through and watch the auction going on. And what I wanted to do was to sort of share that experience with you with a 2-minute video. It's a pretty jazzy video. It's got a nice beat to it and all that sort of good stuff. But there's 2 things I'd like for you to take away from the video as you watch it. First of all, notice just the auction itself, try to get a flavor of what goes on, how the dealers examine the vehicles as it comes through. And the second thing, pay close attention to the technology, because that's one of the things that, just like in any other industry, technology and the internet has very much touched our space in the automobile remarketing. So with that, I'm going to, let's take a look at Manheim.
It started in a Pennsylvania field back in the 1940s. Lanes, cars, the wholesale marketplace. A place where buyers and sellers came together to win. Manheim made the market. That foundation is still here today, and so much more. We reinvented the way people wholesale. Remarketing is a special game played by a special breed of men and women. They are constantly adjusting, altering their attack, sizing up the competition. And Manheim is right there, making it easy for them. Game-changing tools, cutting-edge technology, giving those buyers and sellers the ability and data to make the right call. It's what they need to win. Manheim is the industry's most dynamic marketplace. It's physical auctions, online auctions, salvage auctions, auctions for just about anything that goes. It's about floor plan financing, selling locally and buying globally. More inventory and more buyers with better access and better tools. It's about knowing the market. It's data and action, anytime, anywhere. And it's about leadership, today and tomorrow. At our core, we are market makers. We are more than 20,000 professionals acting as one Manheim team, dedicated to closing deals and making customers successful. The confidence that Manheim instills is something that can't be measured on a tachometer. It's in the faces of those men and women, kicking tires, kicking butt, buying, selling, winning.
All right, ready to go buy a car, right? A couple things about that video. First of all, did y'all notice at the very end that nice holographic display that that person had on there? Okay. We do have the best technology group in the world. Okay, we've got stuff that they haven't produced yet. It was something that they've kind of jazzed up and everything. Did you notice in the video how much of technology was going on? When the vehicles come in there, the dealers are scanning the cards. There's also lots of other things. I discovered they've got this cool little thing that tests the paint thickness. This is one of the ways they determine whether or not there was vehicle damage, because no matter how good your collision center is, they never replicate the paint thickness that has on the vehicle. And typically what they'll do is they'll have these vehicles lined up and they look for the ones that they want. They're checking a product called MMR, which I'll cover here in a few minutes. And very often they will follow those vehicles in and do the bids. Right now, we're closing in on about 25% of our vehicles being purchased through the internet or online. We do about 3.5, or on track to do about 3.5 million vehicles this year. We have 2 primary online channels. One is what's called simulcast everywhere, which is essentially broadcasts the auction in live, so you can do real-time bidding on simulcast. That's constituting somewhere right around 15% or so of all of our sales. And then we also have what's called the Online Vehicles Exchange, or OVE.com. And that is where the vehicles are posted, not in a dynamic auction, but they're posted for a period of time where you as a dealer can go in and purchase for it. Let's see, I think that's, let me kind of move over here to a little bit about our organizational model. Now within Manheim, we do have a consulting group that I'm a part of. If any of you have read Analytics at Work by Tom Davenport and his co-authors, we follow what he calls the consulting model within our organization. It's the analytics group. It's essentially part of marketing, but for all intents and purposes, we do the OR and the analytics for everyone across the organization. And we pretty much matrix out, as you can see, to the different analytics projects with the business unit or with a certain functional activity within the auction. We have 11 analysts supporting over 100 clients and 24 different Manheim departments. Our ratio is essentially 2 to 1 internal to external. Our external clients will include our consignors, major dealers, dealer groups that have specific questions in a lot of cases about vehicle valuation, auction performance, and so on. And I'll have an example of that a little bit later. Our major service lines within that group is decision support, what we call operational development that focuses on the operations of the auction. And then a big piece of it is the customer relationship. We essentially have our analytic architecture set up in 2 ways. We have a production environment, which is basically the enterprise reports and tables. And this is basically a production, as it says, a production system. We work very closely with the technology group in this. And these are the types of activities that we have that are integral to the operation of the business. For example, an analogy, for example, in the airline industry, things like crew scheduling, revenue management, or day-to-day type of activities. This is the same thing we have within our production environment. The big things we have is MMR, the Manheim Market Report, which I'm going to discuss a little bit in detail here in a minute. We also have a used car index. Our chief economist, Tom Webb, oversees that. You will find that car index quoted quite often in the financial press. The car index is a relative measure. I believe it uses 1995 as sort of the base index of 100. And what it essentially does is it measures the relative value of the used car market against that baseline index. I will tell you, in the last couple of years, we have set records on that used car index because of the economy and the reduction in production of new cars. Used cars, particularly new car, or I say new cars, late model cars, cars with low mileage are at a premium, and it shows in the auction lanes and the transaction prices. And we also do some things on floor pricing, and again, I'll have an example that I'll show you here in a second. The second piece that we have is the study, what we call studies and analysis, so special topics of research. This is the specific client problems, and roughly 50% of our analytics in there is a one-time study, kind of a one and done. It's a specific problem that we may have. The group goes in, analyzes that particular problem, reports the result. We archive the code, and we may or may not come back to it. And a list of some of these examples, again, I'm not going to go through all of these. There's a couple of these that we'll talk about. Sales territory optimization and auction consolidation are 2 examples that I will give you here in a minute that we do. Now, again, quoting Tom Davenport in his book, I really liked it when he described it. There's one section there where he called industrial analytics and craft analytics. And this production environment is really the industrial type of analytics as he describes it. It's integral to an ongoing process with recurring benefits. Typically takes a longer implementation because you're working with technology, you're setting up help desk support, you're going through software development, lifecycle management, change management, and so on. Whereas the studies and analysis is what he calls the craft analytics. And this is where it's the ad hoc, one-time type of analytic. And it's faster implementation, and it is analyst-centric. Basically, we don't need anything from technology except data. And we go off and we can do that particular study. Now, I want to spend a couple of minutes on this last one to talk about what I call a crossover. The crossover is basically when, as its name implies, you have these type of analytics that can cross over from one to the other. And this can be both a good thing and it can be a bad thing. I'll mention here in a minute the fact that some of the things that I think is important when you're trying to be fast and responsive with the analytics is how do you leverage technology and how do you have the ownership of the algorithms. For example, in our production environment, we have the Manheim Market Report, the MMR. Yet because we have direct access to that, we're able to use that same algorithm and pull it into the studies and analysis or the craft analytics to do a very specific study. On the reverse, we can do the same thing. Sometimes that other 50% that's not a one-time study can eventually migrate its way back into a production environment if we discover that this is becoming integral to the business process. There's also some bad things that can happen with this too. Sometimes your technology processes, change management, all those things that can sometimes slow you down. If those things filter into your craft analytics, well, then you've kind of stepped into a tar pit. You're not going to be as quick and been able to respond to it. By the same token, if you're trying to do something that is truly a business important or business process analytic, and you're doing it in the studies and analysis space, well, then you're hurting the enterprise because no one can see it. If that analytic breaks, someone picks up the phone and calls the help desk, and the help desk says, what are you talking about? There's some analytic that's running off of one of the analysts, and there's no support set up for it. There's no processes. Technology doesn't have visibility to how this analytic is affecting everyone else. So I think this is a very, very important concept, and it's one of the things I alluded to when I was in the discussion in the abstract about being able to understand and leverage technology. In our particular case, just a little bit on the architecture, we run SaaS servers on both the production and analytics. They have the same access to both the production database and a mirror database. In effect, from an architectural standpoint, we could swap those two. It'd be just as easy for us to switch the colors and run our production analytics off the same architecture as we're doing the craft and analytics. I think that's very, very important because that facilitates the movement back and forth, both in terms of the code, the connections to the database, and so forth. Okay, responsive analytics. Irv Lustig and his team had an article in Analytics about a year and a half ago that came up with some analytic categories that I really liked. He was talking about the descriptive analytics, which is dashboards, reports, and queries. Predictive analytics, and they list what you see here in terms of the different types of techniques or methods. And then the prescriptive analytics, and they talk about optimization. Now, I like the descriptive, predictive, descriptive paradigm. Understand that these particular methodologies aren't necessarily hard and fast. If a predictive or a prescriptive analytic is about prescribing something, in some cases you can make decisions based upon a simulation or some other type of descriptive analysis. But generally speaking, these typically, I think, are pretty good taxonomy. Now, one of the things that, because I'm in the car business, when I talk to the folks in the business, I'll use this description to describe what it is that we do with the analytics. I say the descriptive analytics is like your dashboard or your rear view mirror. It's telling you what's happening right now, or it's telling you what just happened behind you. Whereas the predictive analytics is like the windshield. It's where you're headed, it's what's coming at you, what you can expect in the future. Then of course the prescriptive is the steering wheel and the foot pedals. You have control over what's going to happen. You can make a decision and change the direction of the business or whatever it is that you're doing the analytic with. Now my experience using this type of thing is that generally speaking, as you move up from this descriptive, predictive, and prescriptive, it generally gets increasingly complex. Not always, but generally speaking it does. And it's mainly because there's sort of more of everything. There's more data, there's more variables, there's more unknowns by definition. Things like predictive and optimization and prescriptive gets into things that we don't know. Perception is that there's more math and there's more algorithmic. And this is certainly the case, my experience has been when you're talking to business stakeholders. They can understand the descriptive analytics pretty easily. When you start to get into the predictive or the prescriptive, it begins to look black box. And particularly if they had a bad experience in their last statistics class, then you have additional hard sell on it as well. By the same token, again, in generally speaking, you can get a faster response as you move down. Why is that? Generally speaking, it's less specialized skills, sort of less of everything, less specialized software, and less customized problems. A lot of cases it's easier to get out-of-the-box solutions when you're down at the descriptive level than it is when you're getting into predictive and prescriptive. And you either have to design the analytic yourself, or if it's a well-defined process, you can perhaps buy it from a vendor. And so the question becomes, how do I get this faster response up to here, up into the upper part of the pyramid? Well, I think there's a couple of things. My experience is built on this, and I'll start by saying that there's a lot of good stuff that's been written on this in terms of the last couple of years, in terms of how analytics can be responsive to the business and how we can be faster. I've kind of gone through and highlighted the things that my experience has shown to have been very useful. The first one is, and I think this is very, very important, is that analytics owns the algorithm. By that I mean is that if you're the OR, if you're the analytic person, you own and understand the algorithms that are going on in the business. The example I mentioned to you a minute ago about, and I'll show you here again, the Manheim market report. Every algorithm that's in that production environment, we own. We designed it, we know how it works. So if there's a fast analytic that has to tweak that for a special case, we can do it. We can reach in there and we can grab it. We own it. I think the second thing is to begin with analytics and the decision requirements process. The most successful engagements I've had is when I was sitting there talking to the business stakeholder when the question was being asked. And I found that the reason that's so powerful is because you can actually sit there and shape the way they're thinking about the problem before it comes to you, or before it gets filtered through some type of requirements gathering process. So you can, and it's hard sometimes to do it, but if you can also shape it in a way that's not math, but in business speak, in ways that they can understand, it is amazing how easy you can get the analytics going very quickly, because you know what you need to do. It's just a matter of fitting that technology or that particular algorithm or methodology to the problem that they're having. Analytics is the framework for the solution methodology. I put this in there to say that, again, it sort of pairs with the second bullet, is that you're framing everything. You're framing it in terms of decision analytics. Keep technology as a partner. The earlier slide I had on this said keep technology doing technology things. And before that I was thinking, well, gee, is technology the enemy? And no, it is not. Technology is a partner. But it cuts both ways. In other words, you don't necessarily want technology coming in and trying to step on the analytics space in terms of framing the decisions or doing the decision requirements. By the same token, you as an analyst don't want to play technology. And frankly speaking, that's a temptation for all of us, because we can do it, right? Or we think we can do it. We can do the coding, we can do the algorithms, and so on and so forth. But you have to recognize that at some point, there's a space there where there's a role that technology has to play. There is no correlation between analytic complexity and business value. Conduct the analytics accordingly. There is sometimes a tendency for us to go do the intergalactic coolest thing that we saw, okay? And sometimes a very, very simple model to you is exactly what they need in the business. And that has been, again, in my experience, been very, very successful. Some of the simplest analytics, again, simple from our perspective, okay, answers it just like that. Okay, speed traps. I really like that picture. If there was one thing that I wanted to leave with you, I think it's this very first bullet. And that is failing to connect analytics to customer value. Every single one of us in this room works for the customer. Those of you that are in the consulting business know this in and out because you deal with it every day. You're trying to get clients, trying to get the contract signed, so on and so forth. When you get more into the larger corporations or businesses, sometimes it's easy to decide that. We're talking about how we place it in the organization. Do we belong to technology? Do we belong to the business? So on and so forth. At the end of the day, the business itself is worried about how it's adding customer value, because if it's not adding customer value, you're not going to have business value, and eventually you're going to be in trouble. And this is what the business thinks about. Ultimately, I think it's very important that you're able to connect what you're doing with the analytics to how it translates into customer value. This is for the business side, mistaken technology for analytics. Analytics software is not analytics. Sometimes I've seen it where people will come in and say, oh, gee, we got to solve it. Analytics is hot. Big data is hot. Let's go buy some software. Okay, well, that's nice, but there's more to it than just that. It's the data and it's the people, which is the second bullet, not targeting quantitative analytic talent. So a lot of ink has been spilled on that in terms of the analytic profession and so on and so forth, but this is just tactically saying, making sure that you're targeting your quantitative analytic talent on the things that are quantitative. Process is not equal to analytics. Process modeling is important, but in many cases, a good analytic may completely change the business process. Okay? And so be careful of falling into that trap. And mistaken algorithms for analytics. Algorithm is a black box to the business stakeholders. You've got to explain it. They have to understand what it is. And I firmly believe that's possible. Even the most complicated prediction or optimization model can be explained in non-technical terms that the business stakeholders can intuitively grasp. There's a tendency to lock into a single approach. There is no single approach. There are several ways to solve it, and it might not be the first one that you tried. Trying to get a 100% solution the first time. Do not let the perfect be the enemy of the good. Okay? Most business people would rather have that 80% analytic in 3 days than to have the 100% perfect one in 2 weeks. Get the analytic out the door. Get it in front of them. It has the added benefit is they think they're part of the process. And in fact, they are part of the process because you can get feedback from them and they can see how it works. And that leads in the fact that slow turnaround with no feedback. And lastly, don't think that the algorithms are forever. Every algorithm has a shelf life. Okay, and it's usually a lot shorter than either we'd like or that we think. Okay, let me run through some recent examples from Manheim. I hope they'll illustrate these things I just talked about. The Manheim Market Report. This is the industry's premier indicator of wholesale prices. 3.5 million vehicles come through. Every vehicle we capture all kinds of data on. Who bought it, who sold it, the year, make, model, trim level, mileage, condition, obviously price, and so forth. And every night that Manheim Market Report is updated. There's probably about 40,000 year, make, model trim levels that are active or that are current that we see coming through. I say forecast, we calculate about 16,000 of those. There's enough sample